Hello, everyone. It is Friday, June 18th, and Cabrillo College and the nation is celebrating Jubilee Day, otherwise known as Juneteenth, which is the recognition of the final carrying out of the Emancipation Proclamation that I believe happened on June 19th. I believe the year is 1865. The Emancipation Proclamation in law, as I understand it, happened actually 3 years prior to that in 1862, but Union troops were not able to fully liberate slaves in Texas until this date, June 19th, 1865. So we are recognizing that today, and still a lot of work to be done for human rights, whether they're Black human rights, brown, LGBTQIA, transgender, gays, whoever it is. And I guess that does include white boys surfing out at Pleasure Point today. So let's please understand why today is special, and really every day should be special for all human beings, not only in this country, but throughout the world. Okay, so what I want to talk about briefly is homeostasis. And homeostasis is absolutely significantly important in our body. Our body gets out of homeostasis, things get out of whack, we get sick. In a worst case scenario, we die. And what we've talked about in our lecture videos is that we have homeostatic variables that need to be maintained. These are vital variables within our body that need to stay within a specific range. So these could be fluid levels, they could be ion levels, they could be blood pressure, oxygen levels, pH levels, among other things. So we have a number of homeostatic variables that need to be regulated day in and day out. So let's just take a look at one example of this. And I want to focus on the osmolarity of our blood plasma. The osmolarity of our blood plasma is important because if the osmolarity changes, then the blood volume changes. If the blood volume changes, then blood pressure changes. If blood pressure changes, then the distribution of oxygen throughout our body is dramatically influenced, and that changes. If we don't have enough oxygen being perfused throughout our whole body, we're not making enough ATP. If we're not making enough ATP, we're going to have some significant problems in our body. So I hope you understand all of these variables are tied to one another in one way, shape, or form. So this is also related to what we've been talking about, that is osmosis. Because if we have an increased osmolarity or particles in our blood plasma, osmolarity is merely the measurement of particles in solution. And these particles could be glucose molecules, they could be sodium ions, they could be potassium, any particles floating in that solvent, and our universal solvent is water. So if for some reason the solutes increase, it's going to draw water into our blood. If we increase fluid volume in our blood vessels, it's going to increase blood pressure, which is not necessarily a good thing. The corollary to that is if we lose solutes from our blood, we have a decreased blood osmolarity, then we're probably going to lose water. And if we lose water from our blood plasma, we're going to lose blood pressure, and perfusion of oxygen to our tissues is going to dramatically diminish. Now, I realize I'm talking about a lot of systems in our body right now, but I just want to focus for a second on negative feedback. That is to say, we have a stimulus, we have an input signal, we have a control center, we have an output signal, and we have a target organ. And we've talked about these in previous videos. That stimulus is the homeostatic variable that is deviating from the norm. So if we just look at this, this is going to represent blood osmolarity. This is just a glass of water with 6 solutes in it. And I'm not going to give you a number that we need to maintain for blood osmolarity. all I want you to see in this picture is that the osmolarity is within the acceptable range. If we look at this picture right here, the osmolarity has increased. We have increased osmolarity that's out of the acceptable range. So if we look at that negative feedback loop, the stimulus is going to be elevated osmolarity. There's going to be a signal that goes to the brain to tell the brain to make a decision. The brain's going to be the control center. So specifically, the sensor for this, for blood osmolarity, is in the hypothalamus, which is a region of the brain. Don't worry too much about the specifics of this pathway. I just want to give you a concept of how this really works. But there's a sensor in the hypothalamus, and then the hypothalamus, the region of the brain, determines what needs to happen. Because there is an increase in blood osmolarity, but we can also get an increase in blood osmolarity by a decrease of water. So here, first we had an increase in solutes, which could be due to hypernatremia, which is an increase in the sodium ion concentration. Natremia refers to sodium. That's why we always abbreviate sodium as Na. This is Latin. It could be Greek, but I believe it's Latin. It could be due to hyperglycemia, which is in elevated levels of glucose in our blood plasma. So this is elevated osmolarity due to an increase in the solute concentration in this fluid. But we could also get an increase in blood osmolarity by losing water. So if we go back to here, this was normal. Our water, our fluid right here, with 6 solutes in it. But if we move to here, same amount of solutes, but we've lost water. And it has increased our blood osmolarity, or osmolarity of this fluid. So the hypothalamus of the brain is going to have sensors that detect a deviation of this homeostatic variable, that is the blood osmolarity, which is going to mean two things, which really are saying the same thing. We have an increase in osmolarity, but we have a decrease in fluid volume. So one way to bring this back to normal is just to add water, bringing us back to this. So the hypothalamus senses that deviation, sends a signal to the posterior pituitary to release antidiuretic hormone. That hormone, which is the output signal, goes to the kidneys and tells our kidneys to retain water to put it back into the bloodstream to bring us back to here. So to be clear, the stimulus is increased blood osmolarity. The input signal, which goes to the posterior pituitary, tells the posterior pituitary to release antidiuretic hormone, otherwise known as ADH or vasopressin. Vasopressin and ADH are the same thing. ADH will then be the output signal, which goes to the target organ, which is the kidneys. The kidneys cause the body, or specifically the nephrons of the kidneys, to reabsorb water back into the bloodstream. And the body's response is to increase this fluid volume and bring the blood osmolarity back down to normal levels. I realize that was a lot, but I just want you to understand the negative feedback loop. We have a stimulus, we have an input signal, we have the control center, output signal, target organ, and the body's response. Okay, that's it. It's Friday. Don't forget your quiz due by Sunday and the 2 labs that are due by Sunday night as well.